when this is done, you're not building sets or...
Not today, no.
All right.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, we're rolling.
Oh,
so,
great.
Yeah. Say hello. That was such a, it's funny. So I'll sometimes hit the mics before we start, and sometimes we're kind of into this thing, but this was the most serene intro. Hey,
Here we are having some
rolling.
coffee. Okay.
Tell everyone your full name, Chad.
My full name is Chad Eric Bergman.
You are listening to a chatter. In fact, these aren't interviews, they're conversations, and this is a long time coming. Chad and I met at a party, I don't know how many years ago.
4?
Yeah, and wherever that was, I just remember knowing you the least, but thinking you were the coolest guy in the room.
Oh.
Yeah, as we talked, I thought
that's really hilarious because I was thinking, man, I got to get to know this guy more.
Oh, cool. Very cool. And we talked about coffee for quite a while.
Yeah.
So what better way to do it than in front of mics? And,
I know, that intimate space.
So everybody in the world can hear this talk forever and ever. But yeah, it was such an interesting chat because in the end, I ended up ignoring everybody. And you and I sat outside just talking about theater, talking about art and all that good stuff. And I thought, man, I got to talk to this dude sometime. Oh. And here we are, like 6 years later. Maybe it's been a while.
Yeah. So Karina was still in still in preschool.
That's his daughter.
Yep, that's my daughter, and she's in third grade. So 4 or 5 must have been 5 plus years ago.
Crazy, man. All right.
Yeah.
So you are. Here's what intrigues me about you. Besides just the great talk we had way back when. I don't do too much research before I have somebody sit across. So what I like is that anytime I see you casually, I'm always intrigued because you're dealing with some of the smaller theaters in Chicago. Because you have, what's the name of your theater group?
My theater group's Aquavit Theater Company. Yeah, Aquavit is the...
You're like, let me get something easy to say. This won't confuse anybody. Just say it again.
Aquavit.
Aquavit.
Yeah, so it's Aquavit, which is the liquor.
Okay.
Is the cognate. It's the only word in all of the Nordic languages that is the same. So it actually means water of life.
Nice.
And but we
say it slowly. How are you?
Aquavit. Like aqua velva. Aquavit.
Aquavit.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. So here, a Nordic Theater Company, we were thinking, in Rome, and you have Bacchus, the god of wine, and what would it be in the Nordic countries? Well, it would be like this really hardcore liquor to make life happy.
Wow!
And, so that's we took that name as a kind of a fun name, and that's the company. Yeah.
Oh my gosh! So when we're talking. Sometimes, and it's usually quick little spurts that I run into you. Where you're telling me about, we're building sets or we're doing all of this. Are you writing some of that stuff too, or
in this company? I have been one of the areas that I've done a lot of work in is translating. So I think 3 of the full productions we've done I've translated from Swedish.
Explain that to everybody. Why now?
Yeah, we got this fantastic grant about 7 years ago to be the U.S. conduit for Nordic theater because there's just like this amazing theater happening in the Nordic countries.
Okay, and let's break down the terminology
and
very
nobody
quickly.
knows about it.
Yeah. And folks, just so you know what we're getting into a guy who works in some of the in the smaller, amazing Chicago theater community because the small theaters in Chicago are
the
just
best.
Oh, they're so amazing,
man.
Amazing. The talent pool is just nuts. It's and you never know who has their hands in it. I saw something not too long ago that Jeff Daniels wrote. And it's teeny tiny. I think it's Windy City Theater. I think it's called, but it's amazing. And what's fascinating about Chad is he's bringing that sensibility and mentality to academia. He's working at North Park University in Chicago, basically training the storefront theater techniques to the students, which makes so much sense because they can study and be ready for the Chicago theater, but then they're not going to walk right out of college into the
Goodman or into the Steppenwolf or
So it's an amazing. Not only is it do I find it fascinating to teach people how to do that, but I think even just personality building. I think it really gives you
collaboration, the art, the whole process is collaborative. Yep.
So we're going to get into that. But when you say Nordic, I automatically think of Vikings.
We come from that stock.
Yeah.
That 5 traditionally Nordic countries are 5 countries. So it's Iceland, Norway, Sweden, Finland, and Denmark. So if someone says Scandinavian, they just mean Norway, Sweden, and Denmark. So we say Nordic so we can include the larger area, and that sometimes can include some of the Baltics as well, Baltic regions. Yeah. So, but there's amazing theater happening in those countries.
How did you become aware of that theater?
Back in 96, 97, so 20 years ago, I did a Fulbright year in Helsinki, Finland, and in that year I saw 40 productions, and I don't speak Finnish, so many of those productions I was just looking at the stage, but the stories that were being told and the aesthetic and how it was put together, they were fascinating.
So it was still able to translate even though you didn't know the language.
There's something so amazing about the Nordic aesthetic, and that's one of the things I wanted to bring to Chicago.
If you're looking at 40 different pieces, or a wide variety of pieces, were they mostly period pieces, or was it across the board?
It was across the board. So it could be in this really small theater called Lilla Teatern, the Little Theater, or it could be the giant national stage. But one of the pieces that was the most fascinating for me, that blew my mind away, was this gutted out old cable factory. And a cable factory, they used to have to wind cable like 3 football fields and bring it around, and so that they wouldn't have any dinks in it and dents, but this abandoned cable factory, this theater company in Finnish put on a 5-hour production of Italo Calvino's On a Winter Night, A Traveler.
5-hour production.
5-hour production with only 50 people at a time that could see the production. No, mind blowing, right? And so they ended up. The book, in short, is about 2 readers who are set out to read a book, and when they get to the end of a chapter, the publishers actually did a misprint and put the next chapter of a different book in it, but you got caught up into that first chapter. So somebody else out there has the other parts of this book, these 2 readers are finding their way to each other through the book. And so it changed. Each chapter is a different genre, a different story, something that's really contrasts one from the other.
Oh, wow.
So the 50 of us went through, and they had divided it into small little chapters or rooms with crepe paper. And this narrator kind of took us through the one of the readers, and we experienced each chapter. It was performed for us, but after 5 hours of Finnish, which I didn't know, even the Finns, that's a long show.
That's a long show.
But we were all crammed into a space that was too small for all of us. And then, I just get tingles even thinking about it now, is that the paper opened up and it became this 3 football field proscenium where about 200 feet down, the other reader stepped into a pool of light, and it was the end of the story, and they were going to come together, and they slowly came together.
Wow.
And the payoff visually and like experiencing a story experientially like that, I'd never experienced something like that.
I've never heard of anything like that.
Yeah, so it was phenomenal.
So you were out there studying?
Yeah, it was. Okay, so on another life, I'm an academic, so I wrote a dissertation on the Finnish-speaking Swedish theater of the Nordic region, specifically Helsinki. So I keep waiting for PBS to call me for my...
There's your documentary right there, man.
But...
that's not an area of study that you hear about often, you know?
No, but not at all.
Yeah.
But what it came down to is I'm very interested in bilingualism, and this one theater I was researching was all about 2 languages, Finnish and Swedish, and how they and Finland was is right next to Russia and shares a border, so they always had to be very careful with their censorship.
Sure.
So then this theater company would get the rights from the Finnish censor in the Finnish language, and then the next day they would translate it on the fly into Swedish. But they would change the show, and it became kind of this living newspaper during 65 through 72, 1965.
Okay, so wait a minute. you experience this, then you come back and somehow your mindset becomes you want to take those particular pieces.
No, I just got so intrigued by the concept of the storytelling techniques.
The techniques, okay.
And then I got to know a few playwrights during that time period, and just it's been this long-term relationship with the Nordic countries. That
I mean, when you're doing something now, what language is it in then?
Oh, it's in Chicago. It's always in English.
It's always in English.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so we.
But are you catering to a certain demographic or?
That's been really fascinating for our theater company. We have. We'll do a Swedish play, and we'll get a few of the old Swedish guard here in Chicago, and that's great. But there's no legs for that group to come to the next show.
Sure.
Which might be a Danish play. Then we might get a few Danes that come out of the woodwork to see.
I've never heard the term Danes. I never knew. Yeah.
Yeah, and then a few. If we do a Norwegian show, then the Norwegians show up, but they don't necessarily go to the other shows.
Oh, sure.
The audience that's really grown and for us is the millennials. We have a really solid following of people under 30.
It's interesting because are you bringing pieces that are very famous? I mean, is it like somebody taking, whatever, The Art of War, translating it and doing it here? Or now are people just knowing your company and that's what they're coming for? Or were there the actual pieces that you were bringing out?
Yeah, nobody knows the pieces.
Okay.
So
it's not, no, that was the Singing in the Rain of Finland. I have to go see that. Yeah. It wasn't that kind of thing.
Well, it probably is the Singing in the Rain of Finland.
But there's nobody here that knows that.
And that was the mission of our company.
Talk about like Dr. Niche. You are just...
And grant-wise, that's
tough.
But that's actually really good because nobody else is doing it.
Oh, so it actually served you.
That's served us. And so the Chicago grant community has been really generous to us and have kept us going. And
kudos to them.
Yeah.
Because you'd figured they'd have to look at, not only just the differences in something, but also to see what it might yield, even just culturally, not monetarily, but for them to still say, no, this sounds...
But Chicago is such a mosaic mosaic of theater.
But no, I'm showing them the Star Wars of Finland on stage. It's so interesting to me.
So the Finnish show was unbelievable. It's called Kokkola. And Kokkola is a small town in northern Finland, and the show is about a small community, and it's actually a really generous look at a really hard community. When this is your only people that you know, and last night you saw them all absolutely drunk, shit-faced, and then the next day you don't recall whether or not you slept with anyone or if you didn't, and so it's about that kind of community making huge mistakes, but you still have to get up in the next morning because it's the same people around you. So there's this one scene, about the fifth scene in it, and the Piano Larson, one of the main characters, gets a bottle of vodka, comes back to his van, puts it on a table, and his two assistants who help like move things, that kind of stuff.
Sure.
They put the bottle down and they start drinking. And by the end of the scene, they're all naked and they're all slapping the shit out of each other.
Now,
but we had a violence designer come in, and so everything was like scripted, safe, but it looked so freeform that the reviews said, I could see the hand welt on the guy for the rest of the show.
Oh, wow.
But it's that kind of visceral energy that the Finnish show really brought out. So I loved that show.
Oh, my gosh.
It is one of the greatest hits of Finland. And,
really? So what's it called again?
Kokkola.
Now, where typically are you going from... we're going to do this like 20 times. Shout out the name of your theater company again.
Akvavit.
I can't. By the end of this, I hope I can say it.
Akvavit, like Akvavit.
Akvavit. So are you taking it to different theaters, or do you have kind of a home-based theater?
We had spent a lot of our productions have been at the Den. And if you don't know about the Den is this amazing complex on Milwaukee.
And this is all like north side of the city, folks, of Chicago.
And it is an old, I think, furniture, 3-level furniture building. And Ryan has, the owner-manager, has now made 3 levels of theaters in it. So every level maybe has 2 theaters, and so you go there, and there's also 2 bars. So it's like this event, this place you go to see theater. And so, Aquavit will be playing right next to the Irish Theater Company, down from Co-Candy, who's doing a musical upstairs. Cool. The Hypocrites are downstairs doing their latest thing. And it's just this energy of theater right there on Milwaukee.
So are you, is that mainly your base of operations?
We have done a lot of our shows there. They're great to work with. They really foster that kind of energy.
But you tend to bounce around occasionally?
We have. We've also been up in Rogers Park once. We've been over at the Raven. We've also been at the Rivendell.
Where would you point people so that they can find your company?
That would be aquavittheater.org.
Nice.
Yeah. So it's
spell it for the folks at home.
AKVAVIT, and then theater spelled RE on the end, .org.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Okay, so then what fascinates me is that you thrust yourself into the small theater world. I mean, you built it, and I want to talk a little bit about that, and then about how you've translated to the kids, how you're teaching that, because I want to know what they walk out learning about, and I just want to hear some cool theater stories because I love them. Just the craziness that comes around that. So you decide, if we fast forward to when you decide you're doing this, did you have a partner, or was it mainly your baby, your theater company?
Really close friend of mine, Bergen Anderson.
Okay.
And she is also a Swedish speaker. She and I had this idea 7 years ago that, hey, let's pull this together. And so our first show that we did was up at the Second Space up at the Raven.
Now, did you write, direct? What was
I
your
directed that one.
You directed that one. Okay.
And it was a Danish play that was about a Danish relief organization in Nepal. And it was 10 scenes, and the 10 scenes happened in emotional order, not necessarily in a chronological order.
Interesting. An emotional arc, you followed that rather than... Okay.
Because in terms of like trauma research, there are things and ways that we process our trauma, and there was a significant piece of trauma that happened in the play.
Wow.
And so the playwright wrote it in that emotional order, so that at the end you see... I think the last scene happens at the introduction of the new character, and like the second scene is the one that she discovers the trauma. It's jumbled, but
holy cow!
But emotionally, it's really fascinating. I chose that play because Celia and I had we had been stranded in Kathmandu as we had gone to adopt our daughter, Karina. And when we got there, the U.S. government pulled out its support. And
no.
Yeah. And so we had adopted this 3-year-old beautiful child, our daughter, and we couldn't get a visa. And in fact, the U.S. government said to 56 other families that, no, you can't have a visa.
How long were you stuck out there?
About 4.5 months.
What?
Yeah. So we rented an apartment in Kathmandu and lived a Nepal life. It was really hard at the time. You look back and you go, hey, our daughter, she got to know us. She bonded with us on her terms, her language, her smells, her people.
That's pretty cool.
And so the transition to come back to the U.S. then wasn't as traumatic for her. But having lived in that space, this crazy world of Nepal, I understood the script intuitively. And so that was our first one out. And,
holy cow, what a life, man.
Yeah, and we got 3.5 stars in the Tribune, and this new theater company who's doing this really weird stuff. And
where did you train? Where did you study?
Oh, well, I did a PhD in theater history and criticism at the University of Illinois, Champaign-Urbana.
Wow.
So it's all that academic side of me. But in terms of the practical side of the theater, it's just out of interest in doing. And I'm not formally trained as an actor or playwright or a
fascinating
or a designer. I have classes I've taken. I have a good design sense.
Have you done much acting anywhere in the scene? Is that something that's called out to you randomly as well? Or?
That is randomly as well. Yeah, I haven't really acted in a role for 10 years, and it's funny you say that because I'm now starting to sport a beard, to grow a beard, because at North Park I'm going to play the role of Robert in Proof, the professor father in our school production. And so for me,
you're able to play a role in the school production.
Yes.
Oh, so nice. Is that like primarily it? But does it basically have to be staff and students over there? This is North Park University, great school in Chicago.
Yeah, no, it's we can talk about how the theater program later in that.
Oh, okay.
But I hired a great professional director to come in and guide me and the students into the production that will.
Well, let me ask you a personal question.
Yeah.
I don't want to get too deep here, but when I saw you, our kids go to the same school. When I saw you reading the Cran book to the second, third, and fourth graders. Did you improv that on the spot, or had you ever read that story before?
I read it to my son earlier that week as a trial run once.
Okay.
And that was...
Well, I got to see your work.
Oh, hey.
What was that called again?
The Crayons not go on strike. The Crayons quit the day the Crayons quit.
So, folks, I reached out to Chad, I don't know, maybe it was 2 weeks ago to come on the show. But then our kids go to the same school, and I see him reading this book to a bunch of kids. It was a literacy night, which was great, actually. And you like embody it was all different crayons from the crayon box explaining why they're going on strike.
Yeah, they're so tired.
And I love the fact that every crayon had such a distinct personality when you read it. And as soon as you when you were 2 crayons in, I thought, well, this guy is an obvious professional in the theater world because it was a great performance.
It was fun. I had a blast, and I think
you had a blast. My wife was such a fan of the performance, and she loves theater just in general, and you're just sitting in the classroom on the floor. She was so amused and laughed so hard.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think the adults in the room, they were the true audience.
I was really, I still am this close to hiring you for her birthday party.
Yes.
Yeah, that's awesome. Good gig. Good gig if you can get it.
I'm in.
But anyway, so I wondered about that, but then you could just see, okay, this guy knows his way around characters and presentation of characters. And even though it was a children's book, but you could just see that you were a ringer. But when how much when you suddenly start your own theater company, I mean, you're thrust into it, but now since you're an academic, I would imagine, did you do a lot of research on what it was going to take? So how much did you know?
No,
and then how much were you surprised?
Aquavit is the 3rd theater company that I've started.
Oh, okay.
And it's and I joked, Bergen, my partner, and I joke that we started this during one of the great recessions of a very little known area of the world, and we both were new parents. I mean,
you didn't do it here?
No, it was the theater company is not known around the world. It's like, or not. Nordic theater isn't known around the world, so it's like super rare.
Yeah.
Chicago, nobody knows anything about Nordic theater, so it's like this trifecta of things against us, and it's actually a going concern, but part of that is because I learned the hard way back in the early 90s. I had a small theater company in Chicago called Angel Iron Theater Company. We did a couple shows, worked out of Circle Theater, the old Circle Space up in Rogers Park. And that was right at the beginning of small storefront theaters gaining ground. And we ran it for 2 years, and then I went down to Champaign-Urbana and got my degree. But I just, at that point, I needed to tell stories. I needed to write stories. And so I wrote some stories. We did them. We made tons of mistakes. I think racked up about $5,000 on a credit card that I then spent 4 years paying off. And it's like, okay, I won't do that again.
Yeah.
And then about 12 years ago, a friend of mine moved from LA, cognitive neuropsychologist, and he and I started this theater production film theater film production company of another nearly unpronounceable name called Xunesis. It's Xunesis, and it's actually an old Aristotelian term of the intersection of art and theater, theater and science. Because he was coming from cognitive neuropsychology and creativity. I'm coming from the art world. We're discovering that we solve problems in the same way. But we just think that we don't. We pick up something like a piece of art or a scientific problem, we spin it around, and we see all the angles, and then we make choices, and then those choices lead to better choices and better analysis. In
3 seconds, you just found a bridge that most people in the world are unable to find. It's such an us and them kind of culture, left brain, right brain kind of thing.
Absolutely, and we discovered that it was a great team, and so for about 5 years, we did theater projects, film projects, based on that intersection of art and science. And then, as lives happen, we go in different directions.
Sure.
And so 7 years ago, when I had the idea with Bergen, hey, let's start this Nordic theater company, and then got this grant from the Royal Bank of Sweden. Thought, okay, this time I'm going to put all the pieces together right and not make the mistakes that I had made before. So it was actually born out of the kind of the old school, like I learned because I failed.
Yeah. Any particular lessons or potholes stick out that you knew? Okay, this time we're doing this instead of that. When you jumped into it.
Yeah, well, not use my credit card to fund. That
lesson one.
Oh,
yeah,
that was huge.
Yeah.
I think actually one of the key things was organizational structure.
Okay.
There are people who are trained to do things that and want to do things that you don't know about, and so, for instance, there are people who love to production manage. They love to see all the parts and put it on paper and then make sure that all the parts are in order.
Yeah.
I am a big picture person. I love the ideas, and I love to talk about the ideas. And you put a plan in front of me, and I go, "Oh yeah, okay, that's great." and so that was one of the things that we really needed to do for Akvavit, is have that plan.
Yeah, stopping you right there is so huge because it's not necessarily. Having the plan is fantastic. But that self-realization that I don't think enough people have in the industry. I've seen too many people kind of walk back and forth with this whole, I have the grandiose idea, and it's many times an amazing idea, or I can build a picture in this scene. I know how to do this, or I know, but then I don't know if it's an ego thing. I think a lot of times it's overexcitement. I think a lot of times it's overcaring for your personal vision because you want to see it through the way you're seeing it in your mind. Yeah. But I think what happens is those people, the big picture people, don't break it down and don't take that one, just that little bit of self-realized, just a dose of reality. They don't write that particular reality check of, what, this person can make it happen in this way that I cannot. I can come up with I can say this is what I want the painting to look like, and maybe I can even paint it, but I don't know how to mix these colors.
Yep.
I know the fuchsia that I want. I don't know how to make it, but that guy over there can make the perfect mix. And I think that realization is so huge because more often than not, people just implode their projects because of that line of thought. Not having that openness to not micromanage. That's huge. So I'd say that and credit card, the credit card lesson.
Those are two good things.
Those are great things. Yeah. Oh, wow. So then moving forward, and then as far as other things, the carpentry of it. If you're kind of bare bones when you're first starting out, are you building your own sets? Or are you? Yeah. Even that's tricky.
So Bergen and I, the first time out, that first show that we did at the Raven, we got a designer, and then a couple of really great Chicago designers, but a lot of it we had to hire out and carpenters, and then build yourself. And so very quickly, Bergen and I realized, hey, we should we should create a company. we should bring some other people on board.
Yeah.
And that first show, there were such great people in the cast and around us that we said, hey, come on board, join us. And they pretty much all did, and most of them have stuck with us over these last 6 years. Others have gone on to other projects, and
sure.
But
at that point, it's still about the love, isn't it? Because it's not like year 1, year 2, year 3. You're going to see this amazing monetary return right away. You know, I mean, you might.
Oh, yeah.
But to expect that.
Well, I'm happy to say that we've been in the black every year.
Oh my! Oh, high five me right now. Small theater, yeah,
right.
That's amazing.
And 7 years in the going, and we just did our profit and loss. Actually, there were 3 of us working on a grant last night. 2 primarily working, and I was just kind of like, "Hey, what about this?" You know, I throw in an idea or 2. But we just did our profit and loss for a grant that we wrote for, and we came in the black. So
well, I mean that comes from figuring out the. I mean,
it comes through a lot of mistakes.
Yeah,
but
I think a lot of people, even somebody who works in Broadway, you know, everybody goes over budget. So I think the lesson of trying to make sure that you're careful about your budget and making sure you're not spending way too much on the production, which I think can get hard because I think it gets. Does it get really tough to visualize something and you want to see it on stage, and then when you realize, okay, this is so out of the budget to make it look this way, and I think some people will go too far. Well, no, we're going to get that table, and we're going to build this thing, and I know we're over budget, but we're going to make so much money in the return. It's going to happen, I mean, forcing yourself to say, okay, this isn't going to look exactly like I wanted it to look. I think it could start there, with sets and props and things like that, I mean, is that seems to be like the first area to try to, how do you scale that down without, because you have to reset your brain, because this is what I saw in my head. This is what I want.
Resetting your brain. That's the key thing right there.
Okay.
I mentioned off the record that I directed a show down in Champaign-Urbana at the university, and my budget was $60,000 for that professional show, working with students and designers.
Uh-huh.
And my first professional show in Chicago, the full budget was $200. And so like, what do you do with $200? And that's where you have to start. It's like, okay, we can make magic, and people have made magic like their whole lives with very little.
Uh-huh.
It's that imagination that is key. So you have to reframe, and so I began to think, like, what in the world? What training did I have at the U of I that prepared me to do the stuff that I was seen being done in Chicago, where 80% of the theater is done in these closets, these small boxes. And so it really is like reframing your thought process about, okay, maybe less is more, and allowing your audience their chance at imagination.
It is giving
amazing.
them the credit they deserve, because audiences are smarter, and this I think falls into so many aspects of entertainment, whether it's doing the podcast thing or anything else. I think it's giving them the credit, because we live in a pretty witty culture.
Oh yeah, no,
at the very least,
witty and savvy.
It's
that. So like the show The Vikings, the show The Vikings, like it's a History Channel show. It's
about
the Vikings.
I've heard of it. Yeah, and it's on my queue on Netflix. By the way, I think it's on Netflix.
The first season it's awesome. It blows me away. Okay, so I mean, it is filmed. They can like set it in northern Norway, and they can like ride a ship through a fjord.
Right.
And it's just gorgeous. You're never gonna reproduce that in Chicago.
Sure.
And yet we're doing Nordic Viking kind of like theme thing. So you just have to say, okay, what is the essence? What is the thing that makes it? And that's the jumping off point.
Wow. So right off the bat, though, I mean, geez, you started out, I mean, $200.
Yeah, it was crazy. It was at the old Bailiwick space, and and that included costuming, scenery, and so it was created.
Was it a period piece?
It was not a period piece.
Okay, thank God.
It was more of a performance art piece now that you look at it, and it and so we thought, we got a bunch of paper donated from some mills, and so it was a lot of white paper, and then as the performance progressed, it went from this pristine white, and metaphorically everything got just trashed with paint, and then everything could be cleaned up and put into a bag and tossed away, and then the next day we could do that again.
Nice.
So the paper was donated, and finding that, going to a paint store and getting the discount paint, that's on the wrong mix. I guess aquamarine will work for tonight, and that's that. But visually and telling the story, it all worked together.
So who came up with that? I mean, the idea of using paper, the idea of discount paint. I mean, who?
I did.
Okay.
Yeah. So you begin to think differently. It's like, okay, instead of saying, "Oh man, that's all I got," it's like, "Oh, what can I do?" And it's just flipping the problem solving. It comes back to that science, the science art connection. It's like that kind of problem solving with the essential materials that you have.
Man, oh man! Again, you're. This is a bridge that we're changing history right now,
right here. Yeah.
Because you just never. I mean, I don't know how many times a month I have that talk. I'm a full-time singer. I'm a performer by trade. So you hear the whole, the corporate world versus the artistic world, science versus art, total different worlds that you think never connect.
And yet they should.
They do.
Yeah,
I mean, it's such an obvious bridge. If anything, it's sometimes just perspective, but for the most part, I mean, it's the same approach, and there's problem solving. So wow, okay, I'm a fan. I feel like I just took a portion of your course. So at some point, you're doing this thing, and you're quickly learning how to make big things out of little things, and then all of a sudden, something in you said, "Hey, wait a minute! I can teach this. I can teach this to the youth of America."
So true. So So that's my North Park gig. When I arrived at North Park 14 years ago, there was a theater club, and they were very energetic. But
did you arrive as a student or faculty?
I was hired part time. To kind of usher, and I was told to either build the program or kill it. But I wouldn't get any resources.
Wow.
Okay.
They gave you Old Yeller and a shotgun and said, "Here."
Yes, that's pretty much what they gave me. Oh man,
good luck.
Yeah. And but I had just worked for a year at Live Bait Theater, and it's an old theater on Clark Street, and it was a storefront, great vision, great ideas, very little budgets, and I thought, I can do this. I can make magic out of nothing.
Yeah.
And so then I slowly started to implement this idea of creating a storefront curriculum, saying, okay, there's there are great schools out there. I came from one, and there's Northwestern, and then there's DePaul, and they're kicking out students whose expectation for their graduation is to go right to Chicago Shakes, to go to Goodman, and the reality is that some go to LA, some go to New York, most stay in Chicago, and they're all trying to do theater in these small spaces, and no one's training them specifically for art in those small spaces.
There are more of those than anything else.
80% of the theater.
And they're brilliant. I mean,
it's great.
The best plays I've seen in life have been at some of these small theaters.
It's what Chicago's known for. I mean, that's like Tracy Letts in his Tony Award-winning speech gave shout out to the Chicago storefront community, and that's where it's all at. And so it's amazing to be a part of that energy here in Chicago.
Is there any other program like this? I mean, I've never even heard of it.
No, there are programs that do. They have a small black box theater, and then they do theater in that small black box theater, and they have a curriculum that has the essentials, how to act, how to direct, how to design. But from the get-go, from the moment the students step into our program, to the end, everything is about making theater in Chicago in a way that is creative but uses minimal resources. So
my God.
So the first course that I teach at North Park is this. It's called the Chicago Theater Experience. It's an 8-week course. It's on Thursday nights. We see 6 plays in 8 weeks, and then they're put into cohorts, and then they have to do a very interesting podcast about kind of like a dueling critics, which is WBEZ has this dueling critics concept.
Okay.
And they go back and forth about what they saw, and then they learn to write about it. But it's all experiential, and they're seeing the storefront theater. They're seeing that's what I'm holding up as
now,
examples of what we're going to be
so
doing.
then when they're asked to critique, are they critiquing everything because they're so that they can truly get like an investigation of what's going on, not just the performances?
No, it's a multi-step thing. So the first thing they do is a Yelp review. Because so much of reviews now, if you look at the Reader, you look at other places, they're essentially just small Yelp reviews. It's like, hey, they maybe mention one thing, there's some witty point about it, and then whether or not it's worth your time, And so that's how. And since students now, they speak that language, they speak that kind of Yelp review language. So it's like, okay, that's a jumping off point. You write me a Yelp review from what you just saw, and then I go to more of a review, which analyzes a specific point.
Is that written or is that?
It is written,
okay.
And then the next level is criticism. It's like, okay, find it in its context. Why is this?
So they're writing a review, then they're writing a critique.
Yeah.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
And then the podcast thing happens.
That's something every week that they have to then send me and send to everyone else in the
And
the
is
class.
that live, like for the public?
It's
to hear?
not. It's internal.
Oh,
right
okay,
now.
okay.
I eventually might make that more public, but it's just so that they start talking about theater. Because like the best compliment you can give a storefront theater is that you spent the next 2 days talking about what they did.
Wow.
And so then I offer that feedback to the company saying, hey, here's what the students were saying.
Oh my gosh.
And it's like, oh, thanks.
So you're working in conjunction with someone?
Sometimes, many times,
okay.
yeah. So,
Oh, that's a great jump off. I mean, that's a great starting point. So then from there, where are you going in your curriculum?
The curriculum is broken into 4 different buckets. And it's like you have to talk to parents and you have to make it fast. So I say there are 4 things. It's the page, it's the stage, it's the gauge, and then it's the end gauge.
Oh, look at you.
I know. How about that? I just pitched it too. It's like any parents out there, North Park Theater Program. We need something else besides gauge for that 4th one because you really had me with the rhyming. I know. End gauge.
Yeah.
It's like
end gauge. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's not bad.
Yeah. So it's a page, stage, gauge, and like that. So each one. So the page is all
engage. Yeah. Well done.
Yeah,
you are
man.
a writer.
I'm thinking.
Look at this guy. He didn't know it.
So it's a self-explanatory a bit, but page is all the written stuff.
Sure.
The history, the writing plays, the dramaturgy, and Chicago is this great city for new work. There's a lot of new work. Every company is trying to find its voice and finding its new work. Stage is the acting and directing, and how to act in an intimate space is different than acting in a large auditorium and directing.
Let me stop you there because I'm always fascinated by that because it's weird when I've done more work in film than stage.
Yeah.
And but I love stage actors. In fact, I prefer them because of what they can bring. I just feel like this is just in my limited experience. They know their way around the craft so well. But you sometimes have to rein them in because they're trained to speak to the back of the room.
Yeah.
Where film, everything is so much smaller.
True Chicago actors will know and can dial it down like that.
Okay, because that's what I wonder. What's the difference between an actor being trained who has to jump into the Chicago theater, Chicago Shakespeare Theater, and then suddenly, what's the difference between that and then your performance in a 100-seater?
Yeah. The difference we're working in is that everyone in that audience is identifiable. So it's individual. So the actor is performing at an individual level. When you get into a larger house, it becomes monolithic.
When you say identifiable, is it just because you can see their individual faces?
If you and I are having a scene right there,
yeah,
and there are 4 people sitting on the couch right here,
yeah,
I know that there are 4 people sitting on that couch.
Okay, interesting.
So and that relationship and identifying that they're there,
yeah.
I don't play to them, but I know that there's 4 there. So I'm not going to perform this big thing because they're going to lean back in their chairs and go, okay, eating the scenery.
Yeah.
But if it's a large house, it's a monolith. That it's the group. Or, if there's 2 tiers, it's actually just 2 characters. So you're playing to 2 individuals, but they're monoliths. So it's just a different way to think about it. And to work with actors on that.
Huh. And that totally affects just the size of performance.
Oh,
everything.
yeah. Oh, and
facially and from a projection standpoint.
And one of the things that students, especially students that come from great high school programs, and there are good high school programs out there. I
have to say, I've seen 1 or 2 amazing, where I thought, well, this is actually too good.
But then there's those who just, they come to the Chicago theater experience and they get into this small, intimate space where there's maybe 25 seats, and they have never seen such real acting. It's like they're not acting. Actually they are. That's why it's so good. They're so intense and intimate, and it just blows the students' minds away. It's awesome to see.
I guess it's different, even just the realization that everybody in this theater can see every nook and cranny of my face and how you utilize it all of a sudden.
And the spittle.
Yeah.
We're human. It's like,
absolutely.
I'm sweating.
Wow. Okay, so that's fascinating. So then, and that's stage. And then what was the next?
Gauge, the technical side of theater. So, and there, it is important to know all the aspects of a tool shop.
Yeah.
However, if you work in the Chicago Storefront Theater, you bring your tools with you. You bring the miniature compressor. You bring a box, so it's a smaller toolbox in order to do the things that you need to do. And so it's training them to work within that framework. So, and then Engage, part of North Park's mission is the...
Well, let's back up on Engage. Sure. I'm still fascinated by this part
I'm
of
just
it.
in that zone of pitching to that,
parent
in my
this
office.
Is podcast.
Hey,
this is you.
It's like, oh, yeah, no.
I was wondering why you were handing me that pamphlet while you were... So Gauge, how much can we delve into that? What is the... what's day 1 of Gauge class?
The first, in that same... semester that they do take the Chicago Theater experience, there's a theater production class that is an introduction into the ways in which storefront theater is exciting and the limitations that you'll find, and you can take them as limitations, but you can also choose to expand your...
So do you offer quick examples of, obviously... Limitation number 1, budget. So then you
budgeting is a huge part of that.
So then you break that down. Are you breaking it down just with the tangible or the intangible? Is it just a matter of stage props, or do you take that lesson a little bit broader with whatever costs of running theater or utilities? I don't know how big and how small does that become?
Yeah, that first course is all about kind of the practical side of stuff.
Great.
Then there's a rotation of 2 design classes and a theater production and production management course that are Chicago Storefront specific, about how to design and make choices. So it's that more that
intrigues me. So are you getting into what are they learning with some of that when it comes to the practical? Is it more a matter of going to resale shops and garage sales, or is is that line of thought a part of it, or is it building things?
The theater production and management class, it is a lot of that budgetary and how do you resource and who do you know, and that kind of networking, and networking is a big part of that course.
That is so cool. But starting off with who do you know?
Yeah,
I mean, that's...
it's huge in Chicago. It's like, oh man, I saw that item in a show 2 years ago. I wonder if I can get that. And then you call somebody, you can call somebody, and call somebody.
Nice,
so, we did a show at North Park 10 years ago. Where we knew that the Goodman had done the same show years earlier, and there was a specific piece that we needed, and so it was like connecting somebody to connecting somebody, and they still had that in storage, and so we rented it. And Goodman and Steppenwolf in the past, if you are a school, the rent is negligible. I think it's free. So it's like how to solve problems that way.
Yeah, that's a brilliant thing. I mean, I would have never even thought of that. Kind of outreaching to my first line of thought was garage sales and friends, but to even go to another theater and you'd seen the same, things like that.
Yeah.
That's a whole different mindset. That you are so correct. That I'm certain that somebody's studying for that first step onto the Shakespeare theater. They're not learning those lessons.
No. And I think they're good programs. I don't want to negate anyone else.
Oh, of course not. No.
Like
There's a reason that people are coming here to study, and there's a reason that these schools are spouting out so many talented, successful artists. But I love this twist on it. I love this. I think there's something to be learned everywhere you go. Whether even if it's a similar, broader program. I think everybody has a different take, and this take is incredibly unique.
Yeah.
And I love the thought of like training in this box, so that if you end up falling, luckily, into a situation where you have more resources, suddenly you're in Candyland. Like, oh my gosh,
well, your mind expands.
I've been trained for worse than this. This is fantastic.
That's exactly it. Yeah, and then you can expand and with the resources that you have.
And I think what I love about that is if you end up falling into a bigger picture scenario, and we all know how the arts work. You need to prepare and you need to know what you're doing, but then luck has a big part in it as well. But to know that somebody could take a program like yours and then walk into a big production, a bigger money situation, but stuff happens. So then all of a sudden, like, oh no, the purse strings have tightened. Now you're not in panic mode. You're
like problem-solving mode.
You can look around. Because of the North Park thing. Like, this is what we trained for, people.
Yeah.
It's a whole different... So I like that a lot. I mean, man, you have to get some press. Well, it sounds like you're doing pretty well. You've been around.
Oh, we're trying.
But it's a great outlook that should be focused on, because... Again, there's more. The whole reason I have this podcast is because I'm so fascinated by people who aren't De Niro. I'm so fascinated by people who aren't Spielberg. I'd sing... At this point, I don't know. I think this year I've done 180 shows as a singer, right?
Yeah. Wow.
In my mind, before jumping into the realm that I'm in, I thought, you have to get a record deal. You better be very famous, or you are not doing this for a living. And now that I've seen the other side, now that I am the other side, I've quickly realized that there are so many more of us than there are of them. And the story is fascinating me.
To have a theater company that I can make art with for 7 years, and they're my family. And
did you even know that would exist?
No.
Yeah.
And it is so fulfilling. And it's just, you're absolutely right. There's so many of us.
and people out there. I mean, I've never really put this spin on this podcast. Everybody knows that I like to talk to that sort of middle class of entertainment because I just love the stories. Mm-hmm. I love to hear it. There's so many great lessons to be learned from everybody that sits across from me here. But one thing that I've never really broadened it like this and just said, all you listeners out there, especially the ones interested in the arts, go out and get it, and just know that the brass ring can take many forms, because a lot of times there's nothing wrong with being the toast of Broadway or getting some sort of big fat deal, whether it's movies or music or whatever it is. Nothing wrong with that. But if you can still find your way, it is out there in many different ways, shapes, and forms, many different brackets. What I've noticed personally is that I'm able to really control my own destiny now that I'm the middle class of entertainment, and I like that. I like the fact that I can do a lot of things without anybody necessarily telling me how to do them, There's structure to what I'm doing, for sure, but there's also a lot of freedom.
No, it's great.
Yeah, so that's important.
I tell my students that overnight successes happen in 20 years. and I do that for two reasons. One, I say, it's like they say, "Am I going to make it?" Oh, geez, I don't know if you're going to make it. Do I have talent? Oh, geez, I don't know if you have talent. It's like, but I do say overnight successes happen in 20 years because by the time you're 20 years into your career, you've made choices that if you stuck with it, I'm 20 years into my career, and I think I'm a success,
Yeah.
And it's that kind of joy that I have. No, I'm not, I'm not on late night television. I'm not, in Broadway. But the deal is, I really love the people I work with, the art I make, the stories I tell.
Yeah.
That's a success.
That's a success.
So 20 years, you might make that big break, but you might just make it to the place of, wow, I get to do art. I'm a culture maker.
Yeah. No, that's huge.
That's great. Yeah.
So let's see. We've gotten to, we went past stage, right?
Oh, stage, page, stage, gauge, and engage.
So now engage, is that basically? Which is weird because I thought you said gauge and engage. That's why I totally was ribbing you but no, engage.
Engage.
Oh, nice.
Engage the city.
So now,
engage the
Okay, yeah. Where are we at?
Yeah.
Where does engage sit?
Well, North Park, one of their big missions right now is about the city and being a part of the city, and the city is both what's the phrase you use, text and context for their learning, and so we have been actually using Chicago for about 10 years as a theater program, where and one of the examples, to give you a hard example, every other year North Park rents a small theater space in the city. And then our theater company acts as a company, a professional company, and we load in and do a limited run at that professional space.
Oh, wow.
So all the students get all the practice needed in order to be successful in doing small theater in Chicago.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, it's just an amazing program. So we've been at the Den, we've been at the Raven, we've been in Rivendell, we've been up in Seven Corners at the Filament, and it's engaging the city. And then another way that we do it is then every spring there's the student-directed one-act festival. Lots of schools have this, but for us it is implementing the storefront model into the actual production process. So it's student production manager, student designer, student actor, student written. Everything within that is engaging the city.
So the students that you're taking in, are they across the board as far as what they want? Are you getting the actors, the directors, the everything? Like is an actor supposed to sort of learn the
we are.
The
it's supposed
gauge
to be
and everything.
It's supposed to be a holistic program, because that's one of the things that I found working in Chicago is, especially in some of my actors who have gone on to become master electricians or have gone on to do some production management work, is the fact is that they can do that. They make themselves valuable to a theater company, and then they also end up acting.
Oh, great.
So they find different ways of exercising their creativity.
Yeah.
And so it's like cross-training in a way, learning how to cross-train people in different ways of making art.
Yeah. Definitely the side door, finding the side door.
Yeah. So you asked, like, what students come? I get 10 students who come as freshmen.
Okay.
By second semester, I have 2 that have already transferred out. They want to be stars.
Okay.
That's fine. You go be a star somewhere.
Yeah.
And so, and then I have 2 who were the stars of their high school program.
Sure.
And they're not recognized as the stars anymore, so they find themselves into other majors. And that's fine too. Then that leaves me 6. Then of those 6, that is kind of a core. And they start to hear and understand the bigger picture, and they start to meet people. They start to internship naturally with theater companies. I have guest directors and guest designers who come in from Chicago, and our kids are really kind and hardworking. That these designers and directors tap them to be assistants in other productions.
Amazing.
And so it's this great relationship, back and forth conduit from Chicago to our program.
Talk about just a teaching culture. I mean, naturally, but it's just funny that somebody can come to your program and you really get thrust into the hard knocks end of it as well.
Yes.
To where you can quickly realize, oh, wait a minute, this isn't for me, because there's so many people that want to get into certain aspects of the arts and then they don't realize how hard it is, you know.
It's like Stanislavski, great acting teacher, said something, and I'm going to paraphrase, and it's going to be brutal, so forgive me.
Do it.
It's the thing, do you love the art, or do you love yourself in the art? Another way to say that is that, are you more interested in you in the art, or are you interested in the art? Because if you're interested in the art, you're going to work hard and you're going to do it. But if you're more in love with the idea of yourself in the art, yeah, it's gonna you are going to find other things to do. You're naturally going to be resentful because you're not being recognized for the greatness that you think you are.
Wow.
And it's bringing it back to the hard work that art is hard work, you know, and yet incredibly rewarding work.
Big time. My gosh.
Yeah.
We're going to take our eye blink right now because I want more coffee.
Yay.
Eye blink for you audience. Be right back in, well, a blink. Boom, that was your eye blink. Eye blink for you, about 6 minutes for us to refurbish our coffee. Reheat, refill.
I love coffee.
That's the class I teach here at the podcast. Reheat, refill.
Good class.
Now we shall engage. Man, my stuff doesn't rhyme.
Oh, well, it took me a while and it still isn't perfect, but you know, it's like, well, parents love it.
You are doing, man, you're doing great work. You're doing great work. People need to hear more about this, see more about it, because it's the idea of just walking in. We all walk in blindly, but man, we don't have enough facilities to really get us ready for all different sizes of.
That's, and I was thinking, you know, we were just talking about what students kind of come in.
Yeah.
I didn't start in theater at all. I started in banking. And I was a telephone banking specialist.
Wow.
Out in the western suburbs. I was on the fast track to making lots and lots of money, and you know, in a world that I just was dying in. And I know that there's great reward for people in that, but it was my new wife who said to me, "Man, you're not the man I thought you married." Or that I thought I married. And I went, what? And and she helped me kind of get to the core of where my mind spun around those.
Kudos to her, by the way.
Man, she's the best.
Because to have a life partner, you know, I mean, you have to both want to survive. We have to survive. We have to do well, be ready for later years and all that good stuff.
Talk about the biggest risk in the world of like telling your new husband, don't be secure in banking.
I mean, come on.
Run with your idea.
Come on.
Right?
Yeah.
Right?
You know, so man, you give her a big old hug when you get home.
Man, gratitude is like at the core of my
It's funny because it's all about seeing the joy. You know, my parents were divorced when I was very young, like third grade. And for those years after the fact, boy, kudos to both of them, because my mom allowed my dad to be very engaged. She couldn't stand him, but as much as you want to be with the kids, you're with the kids. So it wasn't like this every other weekend kind of deal. We saw him often, you know, even if she would just leave the house. He can show up on a Tuesday, spend all evening with, you know, all that stuff, you know. But I do remember one thing. As much as they were at odds for most of their, you know, the aftermath of the divorce, he quit singing for many years. And when they met, he was a performer and he was a singer, and he almost made it a half dozen times. And then when it really looked like, okay, this isn't going to fly, he ended up becoming just a mill worker, a welder at one of the local steel mills here in the Midwest. And 16 years after the fact, him and his vocal cronies got together and they started singing again. And they had a big enough reputation in the area to where when they anytime they would get together, hundreds and hundreds of people would show up. You know, it was which is a big deal for just somebody who hadn't done it in 16 years and they weren't true celebrities. Even though there's a song. It's called "No One in This World" by the Enchanters. It's still all over the internet, and I think it's the Enchanters, the Enchanting Enchanters to be exact. I think because there were two enchanters floating around. And they were. there's only one African American member of the group, yet they were a soul group from the 60s. And their stuff still gets play out in Europe and stuff. They're on like a lot of compilation soul CDs out there. I always told him, like, if we would have moved to Europe, he would have been famous.
Huge.
But when he revisited singing, it was maybe the only time after their separation that I saw my mom just happy. And I would always ask her about that. And she just said, there's a smile that he has, and it doesn't diminish his love for you guys or anybody else. There's a smile that he has on stage that he only has when he's singing. And she's like, it's a very special piece of happiness, and I'm just so happy for him when he has it. And you could see that the joy that she had, and it's something to find. And I thought about that. I've thought about it for years after the fact, like, wow, I need to find someone that cares that much about my smile, because it's a different joy, not a better joy, but it's a different joy, and it's one that's very specific to that thing, doing that thing that you love so much, but for somebody to say, well, go find that thing and make sure, and then it happens to be artistic, your wife throwing that out to you.
That's huge.
That is super huge because monetarily it could be super small.
Yep. And,
so that's amazing.
We had this ongoing joke that then she would take care of the first 20 years and then I would take care of the second 20.
There you go. Nice.
20 years, but it all worked out.
Yeah.
No, and as a, that's another thing that is like really important to tell people is like, you can change gears at any time.
Yeah.
And attempt something. You're not welded to what you have to be welded to.
Life is such a tricky thing because you have to have, I think having this sort of pinpointed focus on your goal, whether it's to be the star or whatever it is, I think you need that. You need that focus so that you give yourself a shot to obtain it. Yeah. Right. But then if it does, I think we have to all be smart enough and we have to all put our hearts and our minds on a big enough swivel to be able to recognize, okay, I gave it my all. I gave it my shot. This particular thing, this very specific corner of this dream may not happen. And then some people just defeat themselves and then they just quit cold turkey and they don't realize, like, well, wait a minute. If I can just live with this art because I love it so much, all I have to do is broaden the scope. Even if you just broaden it like 20%, you don't have to go crazy. Feel out, feel it out. See how you're feeling. Because then the next thing you know, two things are going to happen. You're either going to just have disdain and anger because you're just left of center of what you originally wanted, and then you're just going to hate whoever you see that's getting where you wanted to be.
That place,
and then you just get out. Just get out. In my opinion, get out. You know. Or if you find yourself, you might find yourself just loving the art and realizing, wow, I love this big picture. This is cool. I can do this, I think that started happening to me when I started singing backgrounds for people. I started to do backgrounds for like some traveling musicians and things like that. And again, you just love it so much. I loved it so much, And now I'm lucky to where I'm front guy in most of the things that I do. But often I'm getting a call, and I have friends, I have peers who will get the same call I will. And, sometimes you're a singer and you're really good at what you do, and you're going to sing backgrounds for someone who the people want to see, and you quickly realize, wow, they're not very good at this. I've done that. I've worked as a background singer, surrounded by 5 other amazing background singers for somebody who was maybe one of the worst singers I'd heard, and thought, well, wow, this is fantastic. It's amazing. But I love, I'm on this great stage and I'm experiencing this great music and I'm doing these great things. So it always really worked for me. You could maybe chuckle about the fact that, well, this person does not sound very good, but it never brought me down. Whereas I've also worked with some people who just couldn't stand it. Like, I'm blowing out my great.
I'm better than this.
I'm utilizing my mastery of the craft back here as a background singer for this person who, and it just feels like, well, that's and you know what? I only fault those people if they stay. If you have a problem with it, I don't fault that. If it hurts you, I don't fault that. But if you stay in it, well, then you're making your own bed.
Don't be the poison then.
Yeah. Totally. And there's too much of that.
Yeah.
And I think that's how the tainted thing happens, because you run into tainted people, which seems like a good lesson to for anybody coming in.
Huge.
Do it for the love. Do it for the love. Don't let yourself get tainted. And if you do, I think everybody out there needs to pause and investigate, look into themselves, and figure out, okay, why am I feeling this anger?
Yeah.
And if you can't deal with it, you leave. And if you can, then you work around it. I've told this story on the podcast before. I hate to repeat it. This might be the second time I've repeated this story.
Well, I've never heard it, so tell me.
It's the first time for you.
Robbie, tell me.
I told you how when I came to town, I was doing piano bars and stuff Mondays and Tuesdays. And I remember the first time that I'll say this quickly. The first time I was doing on Monday, and maybe I was a year in, and I sat down. It's time for my first song, and the place was just empty. And I remember feeling down, and that was it. That was the biggest moment of my musical career as far as internalizing what I do, because that was the moment when I almost thought, "Oh crap, what am I doing?" Because I've worked with people who've done that. What are we doing here? What am I doing here? Mm-hmm. And then something clicked in me, and I thought, "Wait a minute. I'm getting paid to sit here and sing songs.
Yeah.
Like, come on, knock it off." And that changed everything. Because since then I've met, oh my gosh, 20, 30, 40, 50 dark, tainted people.
In that regard. In theater, it's like you do it for the audience that showed up, not for the ones that didn't. So you have an audience.
That is great.
You have an audience of 7 people. You give that best show for those 7 people, and guaranteed the next night there'll be 10. Because, it's like, I just saw this show.
Yeah.
Rather than like, oh, there's only 7 people in there, and then the next night there are 3.
And, and if you want to, you can even break it down to another lesson of muscle memory. I know a lot of people that can only put on a certain performance when the room is packed. But if you put on your best, no matter what, day in, day out, well, you're conditioning yourself as well. Look at it that way. And then you're not running out of juice. You don't realize why you don't have the juice to get through the big packed crowd the way you truly want to. Why are you so exhausted? Well, because you've only been doing it, half-heartedly the other time. So that's interesting. So I would imagine, knowing the way you look into things, and I love the way that you kind of, your heart and your brain shake hands, and that really helps.
It's been a long process.
Yeah,
but
I wonder how often you're able to. How often are you able to give that little theatrical Yoda speech in the midst of all the practicalities that you.
Oh yeah.
Because you're like, this is what you do. This is the budget. But then at the same time, stripping it down to ready are you? No.
No. Ready are you? No. Often, especially with young students.
Yeah.
They have a lot of. They have just it. One thing working with students is they keep you young. It's just they're the same age every year. Because they're always 17 through 23.
Yeah.
And yet, I grow older each year. And but I don't feel it. I feel like I'm the same. That I still feel like I'm 32.
That's
it's like
great.
That. And but so they come in with this energy, but that energy is also the flip side is that like the wind can be taken out of their sail like that. They just deflate, and it's giving them the 4 years of stamina, so that when they go off and they meet somebody that does not think the same way that they do, that they don't have to compromise themselves and the art that they do, that they've been thinking about that. This comes from several years ago. A really good friend, an actor who went out and acted in Chicago, and she came back 3 years later and said, "I am so mad at you." I was like, "Oh, no, what? No, tell me." And it's like, "You taught me how to be a good actor. You did not teach me how to be a good actor with bad actors." And I went, "Oh man,
wow, that's
right. I didn't, because I was busy on the like thinking about the craft of how to do that. So I started to think about, okay, how do you protect yourself and still do the work that you need to do when others aren't there? You talk about that bitterness or that
being tainted.
Being tainted. How do you work with people like that? Because you will, and you have to, and still keep that glow, that place within you, that creative spark. So that's that is. I've learned how a little bit now within the 4 years of when to say the certain things I need to say in order to get them to do the things that they
because that is a tricky lesson. How do you deal with those people when you're forced to work with them? That's I can't imagine. What are the easy answers to that too? Because sometimes you have to come up with your first answer right off the bat.
Yeah.
As soon as you're working with somebody who has a different viewpoint that might be more poisonous.
Yeah.
Because it's not scary. It's not necessarily scary to think that you're going to work with somebody with a I love the poisonous thing, with a venomous attitude. It's more dangerous when you realize, well, they're not going anywhere.
Yeah, no, and you have to work, and how do you work with them?
Oh my gosh.
So it's one of the things we talk about a lot about is like, hey, is it where is their attitude or their energy coming from, and does it affect what I need to do right now? And if it does, how do I make choices to get to the next step? Which is, in a production, it's pretty easy. It's like, okay, we're in rehearsal process, but the next step is tech. And then the next step is the dress. And the next step is the performance. So what are some of the ways to creatively collaborate with challenges? And that's an ongoing discussion and within the process.
You're enriching lives. I like it.
Trying.
You're preparing people for life.
Yeah.
Because it's easy to take a lateral step from the realm, as far as the atmosphere of art, to anything else with what you're teaching. You're teaching them to use what they have.
Yeah. It's problem solving. And I have having now been developing this like storefront theater program at North Park for these years, about half of my students are in the field working in theater, and the other half are problem solving in other fields. But they all come back to me and say, pretty much learned it in the theater program, how to work with people and how to solve problems.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So and it's called the storefront theater program.
Yeah, the storefront model.
Storefront model.
Yeah.
So now I want your pamphlet.
All right. Whoa, wait. Here it is now.
That's amazing, man. Yeah. Seriously. But then talk about still, you have to, you have too. I always hear that, a musician saying is, feed the soul, feed the wallet. You have to do both. Mm-hmm. But because you're still doing your theater company outside of this, though, in my opinion, both are feeding your soul in a different way.
Yes.
So that's great.
No, it is. Both of them are. Yeah, I've had to try to keep both of them separate. Just in terms of the practicalities. There's certain things like academic freedom I want to be able to do in a theater company that I can't do at a university.
Sure.
So so I wanted to keep them separate, but they definitely do feed each other. Even
yourself. Do you feel yourself grow? Because I gave voice lessons for a while, and noticed just myself getting better at the craft, or even just strengthening myself, things like that.
No, you have somebody in the student realm that says, "But hey, Bergman, why do we do that?" And then I go, "Oh, yeah, it's a great question." And then I think about why we do it at my theater company. And I'm like, actually, we don't do it that way. Huh. We do it this way. Oh, okay. And then it it affects the how I teach and yet it resonates back and forth. Yeah.
So there are times. I don't know how you're able to manage it, or if it just all happens and explodes at the same time. But there are times when you are in the middle of the student production, because you're actually putting on productions by the end of it. You guys are putting on a production, correct? Or,
at North Park?
At North Park,
Oh, yeah. There's 2 full productions every year.
So you're in the midst of that particular tech week or whatever, and then all of a sudden you
have another tech week with the professional theater company.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is where my wife also extends a lot of grace. It's called being a theater widow. So there's moments where all of a sudden I'm gone, and I'll be gone for 3 weeks straight, and we've learned the strategies on how to make that work.
But that must be, I mean, I figure it's obvious, the strain that it can have on the personal life and family. But I mean, when they're running parallel paths like that, that has to be maddening. How the heck are you doing that?
Time management.
Okay.
That was pretty good. That was pretty key.
I mean, have you ever had like Tech Week fall in the same week?
No. Fortunately,
okay.
Actually, we have. I wasn't a part of that production.
Non-theater folks, Tech Week is basically. I mean, you're running everything, right?
Yeah. You're pulling it together, all the visual, sound, and light, everything together. So actors and directors have had maybe 6 weeks to really work with material and develop it. Tech Week is like 1 week that all the people who do the designing get to make it happen.
Yeah,
and it's intense. It's a pressure cooker.
But man, it just seems like running both at the same time. That's impressive.
Don't get too there was a near crash and burn about a year ago, and
I can imagine.
And it was really because of the fact that we had gotten into a rhythm, my wife and I, about how to do this with one child. But when we brought our son Anderson into our family, all of a sudden there was 2 children, and it's true. One child changes your life. Two children like completely.
How old are your kids?
6 and 9.
Everybody that I know who adds the second child, all I can say about all of my friends that have done that or family is they just seem more tired.
I, a year and a half ago, didn't have any gray, and the gray all through the sides.
Oh, it's like you've been the president for a while.
It's that pressure cooker, yeah. So this year there was this compression last spring or this past fall that just kicked my tuchus.
Oh man! but you're in it, like you're making things happen.
Yeah.
Do you prefer writing or directing?
Oh, that is really a great question. There are different roles within me. There's something about birthing an idea, and then seeing it come into fruition on the stage that is really exciting. That playwriting, there's that inner story that has to be told, and it's coming that way. But a director also says, okay, this is the time that this story needs to be told, and you read a script, and so you work with that material with people, and so one is like more of a gardener, and the other is like a general.
Do you prefer to do both? Have you ever directed your own piece?
I've separated both of those out. Early on, I had a really good friend who just said, those who tend to direct your own work miss the opportunities of seeing the nuances that can be happy accidents.
Oh, that is fantastic.
And I would much rather have somebody take my work and go, this is what I got out of it. And I would go, yeah, I love that. I didn't think of that, Or,
oh, that's cool.
Yeah. So that for me, that makes sense. I know that there's some writers out there that say, no, it's my way or the highway. And
yeah, it's only been different projects that will only be seen in independent type areas, but I've directed what I've written often, in film. So I do like it.
Actually, film seems to be a little bit different. And I've made one film, and I realize I don't see things in time. I see things in space. So film.
Explain.
Yeah, film is about every frame, 24. There are these. Every moment is a piece of time.
Yeah.
And then all those pieces of time are put together to create the fullness of the story. Theater is about, while it takes a 2-hour production, it's all about space and relationship. And so you step into someone's space and you share that space for that time.
You're talking how you're physically sharing the space?
Physically and metaphysically.
Okay.
Yeah, so you're sharing it, the actual like 4 walls, but you're sharing a story of that space. The audience is actually there in that with you, and the story can't happen without the audience. So it's that shared space. So after making the one film, I had a great time, and people said, "Hey, that kind of looks like an Ingmar Bergman film." It's like, oh yeah, well, I'm pretty influenced, I guess, by Nordic film.
Okay.
But seeing things in space, that's the storytelling that I came to really embrace and
love. The craft is similar yet so very different, because especially as an actor, you would think, and I've done very limited theater work, but I would imagine there's a different energy happening when you feel the presence of a crowd, even if it's not like when I'm singing where they're this instant gratification of woohoo, but just knowing that they're there.
An audience is breathing with you if you're in the zone. Oh, it's just like so exciting.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah. No, it's like that, the absolute silence, the non-stir of stir when it's such a point where everyone is leaning forward because it's so important to know that you just feel that electricity in the space.
Oh, that is cool. Yeah. Wow, man. Well, I think and what about the pitfalls and the crazy stories? Anything completely ridiculous happened to you over the last decade or so? Have actors walked around and suddenly their pants drop on accident, or hopefully nobody's been overly injured or anything?
No, I've been in. There was a production of Ibsen's Ghosts that I directed several years ago, where the main character, she had the flu and she didn't know it, and she came on stage and the lines were all gone, and everyone tried to piece it together for about 15 minutes, and then one of the lesser characters came on, and this kind of it was like,
when you say the lines were all gone,
she just couldn't remember a line. Her mind, the flu had taken over, and so then the character, one of the minor characters, comes out and starts to give a speech about your tickets can be refunded, and everyone thought it was funny, and they kept laughing, and no one would leave because it seemed to be this absurdist take on this play, and but that was one of those.
And did the audience eventually understand what happened?
They did, they totally did.
But they stayed.
Yeah, they stayed for a little while, thinking, "Oh man, this is what's going to happen next."
How did that scenario end?
Oh no, imploring, and then he left the stage and said, "What do I do? I wasn't there." And he said, "What do I do?" I said, "You got to go back out there and do it again." So he came out and everyone cheered. And it was like, "No, this isn't comedy. You really this. I have to. This is done." Then people started to get
blurring the line between reality and the art. Yeah. Oh, that's insane.
Yeah.
And it's funny because it happens on all levels. I have a friend who is playing for Hamilton in Chicago. And a mutual friend of ours went to sit in the pit and check the whole thing out. But I was talking to this buddy of mine. I should have him on. I never really thought of that. But he was talking about how, it doesn't matter, like, the success of a show, how big a show is. Even in that show, there are times when...
You're always going to have that.
And I thought, in Hamilton? He's like, yeah, I mean... It'll shut down. We have to restart a scene because of all the technical things going on,
Oh, wow.
And he's like,
that's a technical show, too.
Yeah, he's like, it's just, there's no way. Sometimes there's nothing we can do, and we have to kind of stop and restart, like an actual song and stuff, because there's a marriage between this full pit that they have as well as a few sequences, not necessarily just fake, not fake, but tracked recordings. I work with sequences all the time where sometimes it's just a click track.
Oh, sure.
That's click, click, bridge, and that's counting you in certain things and stuff like that. And if that goes, I can't
solo.
But in my world, when it happens, because a lot of your major artists do this, but we have. If I'm working with one guitarist and we're doing a song that has 3 guitars, then he'll track 2 of those guitars. So sometimes people will hear and they'll say, "Well, where's the other guitar?" And it's a tracked show. There are these different tracks. But if we go off, if something weird happens, we're a band and it's just me. I could keep singing. We can keep vamping, but I can't imagine doing it in a play because the performer on stage doesn't know what's happening. They're still going with their song. Oh man, I mean, all of that stuff. The more technical, I would imagine, the more headache.
The more layers you put on, the crazier it gets.
Oh man. Well, did you have fun doing this? Was this cool?
Oh man, this was great.
Okay, cool. I'm glad you finally. A long time coming. I'm like, I gotta sit down and have coffee with that guy. At the time, I didn't have a podcast. I don't think I might have mentioned it to you, randomly over the years, but
it was I think 2 years ago when Karina was a first grader and your daughter was in kindergarten, and we were at the park.
Playground. Yeah, that was my workout.
Yep.
I was the dad that decided to go in and play freeze tag. So yeah, those I think every time for a while, as soon as summer hit, I felt like the first month of summer I would probably put on 5 pounds, because in the spring trying to play freeze tag with like grade schoolers, like, and after, I don't know if you ever noticed, but I would play with my daughter, but then some of her friends would want to play, but then the whole group of kids, there'd be these strangers just saying, yeah, we're all in. Yeah. Cut to like me playing with 20 kids. People would ask like, well, what do you do to stay in shape? Well, there's this freeze tag course that I take 4 times a week.
Do a video, like some kind of like program, it's like
there's
a freeze
the money.
tag. Yeah, right there.
There's the money. Freeze tag, Man, I think what you're doing, geez, you're doing the Lord's work in stage, whoever that Lord may be, for whoever out there, you're doing it. You're doing great things. I think it's a brilliant niche that you found, and more power to you. I'm glad that it's maintaining and doing well.
And we're in just such a great city and a great neighborhood that why would I go anywhere else?
Seriously.
That kind of thing. Yeah.
If people want to know more about the program, do they just look for North Park University?
North Park University. Click
Chicago?
On the new School of Music, Art, and Theater.
Okay.
So that was a big change as well this year. So that's in Chicago. So northpark.edu. And if you want to look at the theater company, it's Akvavit Theater, AKVAVIT, THEATRE.org. And you can hit us up there. We have a couple shows a season. Every summer we do this crazy thing in the neighborhood. So if you're in the neighborhood, it's called Backyard Bergman. And
what is that?
Backyard Bergman is this. We started last year. We did a full staged reading with lights and techno in our backyard of Ingmar Bergman's The Seventh Seal.
Really?
And everyone thinks it's so dour and so like stark, and it's really funny. And it was really funny. And there were about 40, 50 people that showed up for our backyard, and they brought chairs and blankets.
When does this happen?
And it's usually the second weekend in July on
that
Friday.
Is awesome.
After the 4th, so everyone is like ready for something different. And so this year we're going to do Wild Strawberries, and then we'll just take a different Bergman film, each summer, just something for the neighborhood, someone who you just want to hang out on a summer night.
I totally want in on that.
And
that sounds
it's hilarious.
Great.
There's a tent, there's a beverage tent, because the Nordics drink, and so that it's fun. So
very cool.
So and that's part of the theater company. So it's like one of those events. It's what we call a fun raiser instead of a fundraiser. So that's the hat.
Well, there you go, folks. I mean, now you know everything that you need to know. Now just get out there and get it. I mean, especially you students out there. Oh my God. I mean, this is a whole different line of education that is necessary, and it will serve you so well. Find this guy, find his program if you're in the Chicago area, or if you're one of the many, many folks who are moving to Chicago just for this area of study. Look for this, because this is what you need to know. This isn't just something to get you through so you can move on in life. This is something that will enhance everything you do after the fact. So you definitely want to be a part of this. Find this guy, find the company, find the program, or just find him for a cup of coffee. And did you have
Coffee's
fun?
good.
So you had a good time. That's a good
Rob,
thing.
This is fantastic. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
this is great.
You'll have to come back, and I'm really intrigued by the backyard fun thing. That sounds cool. So
Backyard Bergman.
Who knows? Maybe we'll have you back on either after a crazy production or after that, because I want to experience that.
All right.
Deal. So this is Robbie Celestin and
Chad Eric Bergman.
Thank you for being here, man.
Oh, thank you.
Much
for having
appreciated.
me.
We'll have you on again sooner than later. And everybody, there you go. You've met him. You love him. Have a great week. Have a great month. Have a great year. Go out and find your smile. Thanks. Thank you, man.
Thank you.
Oh,
man. It's gold.
You are a wealth of information.
Oh, man. I get in that college mode, too. So if I ever sound like I'm being a teacher.
No way. No. It was more mentor. You were Yoda. Yeah.
Obi-Wan has taught you well.
Welcome to my life so far. You'd think by now I'd be a star. may be long-winded, but hey, there's just so much I have to say. Maybe lick your lips when you're hungry. Maybe drop your head when you're sorry. Maybe shake a bit when you're worried. That's just